Sad, sad, sad looking. Welcome back to Dickin' Around Outdoors. Today, we've got a video that has been a long time in the making. As you can see, we have our Grenadier back. And it has been over a year since we've had this vehicle. And today, we wanted to take a moment to tell you about the accident, what happened, what the damage was, why it took so long to fix, and how it's performed after the fix and some of the stuff that we've done to test it out. So stick around, I think you're gonna like this one. Before we actually talk about what happened in the accident, let's take a quick look at the anatomy of the Grenadier. So the first thing I wanna show you is behind the front bumper. Behind the front bumper, back behind this screen, is a cooler. And that cooler is the cooler for the transfer case. And if you look behind the wheel, there is a cover behind that. And underneath that cover, you can see the oil cooler and the two fittings. The fittings come out of the oil cooler on a flexible hose and connect to rigid tubing that then goes back to the transfer case. If you saw our original video of the accident, you saw that the front bumper, even though it was steel, was pretty well mangled up, as well as the valance around the front headlight. But what you didn't see is when the accident originally occurred, this bumper was pushed back so far that it actually pushed into the tire and was, I guess, deforming the tire a bit. It was in there so hard. So we actually had to use the winch from another vehicle to pull the bumper away from the tire in order to be able to turn the tire and get in there and do our work. Once we got everything taken apart and the cover, which was mangled, tossed into the back of the Grenadier, we found that on the lower fitting, it had actually snapped the nipple off of the cooler. So we couldn't reconnect the factory line. So what we did, and one thing that you'll find if you ever do the Mexican 1000, is these guys come equipped to fix things, because Baja does break things. We were able to take a section of hose that someone had, put a hose clamp onto the little nub that was remaining of the nipple, and then in order to connect that hose to the hose that existed, we cut the fitting off of the factory hose, and we used a socket as a hose connector. That's one thing that they didn't have. We used the socket as a hose connector, clamped that on, so that we now had the factory hose with our fix clamped to the oil cooler. And then we strung the oil cooler up with some baling wire to get it as best we could back into place. And at that point, we were able to drive to a local sort of auto shop, and they did a great job. They welded a new nipple onto the cooler. They were able to get some high pressure hoses made, believe it or not. And we thought we were good to go. And everything was great until the last day, which the finish of the race involved going through some heavy wash and digging through a lot of sand, and we were able to get through that sand fine, no problem, get across the finish line, then shut the vehicle off to have a beer, and when we went to restart it, it wouldn't start, and this was the result. So now we're at the finish line, we're parked on a road that had been closed for the party, and we're waiting for the tow truck. And we're waiting. We waited some more. And finally, we started getting notices, you need to get that off the street because they're going to open the road back up. And like, well, I don't know what to do about it. So finally, this truck shows up right before the road's going to open. And we get it onto the truck. I'd previously called the hotel and said, this is what's happening. Do you have a place I can put it? And they said, sure, bring it over. When we got to the hotel, they said, you can't put that here. So this is just getting better by the minute. Finally, we got the security manager and everybody involved. We were able to find a spot to keep the Grenadier for the night. And the next morning at 7:30, we picked up the Grenadier. Now, mind you, this is in San Jose del Cabo. We picked up the Grenadier, we drove it to Cabo San Lucas, and we dropped it off at Leb's, which is a freight company for the Baja region. This was set up by Mexpat Movers. Thank you, Mike. I'm telling you, if you ever have any problems in Baja, Mexpat, give them a call. And that was the last that we saw of it. It was then headed to San Diego, but we didn't know when it would get there, necessarily what route it was taking. We did know that it was going to stop in Tijuana, at which point it was going to be put on Mexpat's flatbed, towed across the border, and then to Mossy INEOS in National City, California. We dropped this truck off in Cabo San Lucas on May 4th, 2024. We spent a couple extra days in Cabo thinking maybe this thing would take a beeline to Mossy INEOS. Then after 2 days, we realized that that was not going to happen. We flew home, and the truck slowly made its way up to San Diego, and I think it was probably about a week and a half before it got to Mossy. And if you recall, right, the truck didn't stop, and our thought at that time was perhaps we had gotten some bad gas at our last fuel stop, or at least our fingers were crossed, and that's what the problem was. But it was now at Mossy. They were going to have a look at it, and we were waiting to hear what the issue was. Okay, my friends, at this point in the story, I would suggest grabbing a cold beverage and a chair as we get talking about the details of what happened and what it took to fix it. So, at this point of our story, the truck has crossed the border, and it is now sitting at Mossy INEOS in San Diego. And I get a call from Taz, great guy, great service manager. And he said, hey, we have good news. We figured out what was going on, why it wouldn't start. And it was sort of something that some of us had conjectured. It was because the fuel pump had shut down. And the reason the fuel pump shut down, they had determined after a lengthy diagnosis and a lot of communication back and forth with INEOS, because, of course, at this point in time, these vehicles had only been in the States for, what, 3 months, 4 months, and nobody had seen this before. So with the help of INEOS, they had figured out that it must have been going through that deep sand right before the finish line. The transfer case got too hot. Even though we didn't have leaks and that sort of thing, I think the fluid must have been down just enough that it got too hot. It threw a code, which it should have done. So, thank goodness it threw the code and we didn't do any damage to the transfer case. But it threw a code, it shut down the fuel pump, and that's why the vehicle wouldn't start. So we're thinking, good, we're in a good place. But, says Taz, once we got it started, it wouldn't go into gear. So, another round of back and forth with INEOS, engineers, diagnosing, etc., we find out that not only had the transfer case thrown codes, but it had also sent codes to the transmission that then locked the transmission out so it wouldn't go into gear. At this point, then, they did get it running. I got the message saying, hey, it's running now. We're going to run it over to the body shop and let them start doing their work. And we're in the June timeframe. We're in the end of June 2024 timeframe. So at that point in time, we also start working with the Mexican insurance company. As the body shop's doing their dismantling so they can see what's really wrong and what needs to be done, you can see some pictures here of what they sent me. They discovered that being such a new vehicle, they didn't have nothing in their databases or computer systems for parts, part numbers, cost. So nothing could be done using the computer programs, plugging in things and letting the computer spit out, here's what needs to be done. Everything had to be done by hand, which meant that once a part was taken apart, it had to be sent over to the parts department. A picture had to be, I should say, to determine what the part number was and what was needed. And in a lot of cases, from what I understand, is that this involved sending photos of the parts to INEOS so that they could then kick back and say, this is the part number that you need to replace that and repair that. So this went on. This went on. And in the meantime, we're still working with the insurance company in Mexico, because the way it's explained at this point now is that if you have insurance from the Mexican insurance company, which you have to have if you're in Baja, that company will equalize labor rates between Mexico and the U.S. and not pay full U.S. rates. That's great if you can get your vehicle fixed in Mexico, but imagine the Grenadier at that point in time had no dealerships in Mexico at all. So we're back and forth with the insurance company while Mossy is doing all of their work. Fast forward to probably August of 2024, and I finally get the estimate from Mossy. They've got it. We send it to the insurance company and start the ball rolling. The insurance company comes back with an estimate that they'll pay of about 50% of the estimate. In the meantime, I've told Mossy, hang on, we're working with the insurance company. Once we sort it out, I'll tell you. So we're back and forth now. Myself, the person that I had gotten in the accident with, and the insurance agent in Mexico, back and forth, trying to sort all this stuff out. December 2024, I finally called Mossy and I said, I don't care about the insurance, just start fixing it. Let's get this thing fixed. And we're still working with the insurance company. And finally, in sort of late January of 2025, we come to terms with the insurance company. They threw in a chunk. Bobby, thank you for standing up. The man that hit me threw in a chunk, and I covered the rest. And we finally got the insurance sorted out. Mossy is now in process of repairing the vehicle. And of course, as always with some new vehicle like this, there's a last minute find where there was a part that they had intended to reuse that wasn't in good shape. It ended up leaking when they got it back to the repair shop, so they had to order a few new parts. A little bit of last minute pitch in for the parts. And finally, in May of this year, it's ready to pick up. Come on out and get it. So now, here is the estimate. Here is the paperwork. Here are all the parts that needed to be replaced for this. That, remember, all had to be written up by hand, finding the part numbers, finding the pricing, getting that all sorted out. So that was quite a process. My nephew flew down to San Diego. We went over to pick up the truck. So now we're ready to go. Looks great. They did a really nice job fixing it up. You know, I still want to make sure everything stays cool when we're driving it. And we take off from San Diego, and we're going to drive this back to Chicago, my nephew and I. But we're not going to just take a straight route. We're going to go up, visit another nephew, do some wine tasting, cut across, go to some national parks. We went to Joshua Tree. We went to Grand Canyon. We went through Colorado. Sadly, the trails around Durango were still closed for the year, but we did get a chance to do the $1 Million Highway and came back that way. And through the whole thing, the truck ran great. Transfer case stayed cool, and all was good. I still wanted to get a little more done to it. I hadn't really got it in four-wheel drive, hadn't done a lot of that stuff that you just want to check. You always want to make sure. So INEOS INEOS, where we bought it, north side of Chicago, fortunately had also scheduled an owner's day at the Crandon International Speedway, which is a dirt track up in Crandon, Wisconsin. Great place to do some off-roading. So the month after we got back, Camera Lady and I drove up to Crandon, and we got to do some off-roading in the truck. We got to drive in some really slippery, muddy parts. We were able to use high and low range, locked, unlocked, kind of run the whole gamut of engaging everything, and everything worked great. We had no problems with the truck at all. So I would say that now we are golden. We're back in business, and we are ready to go with the Grenadier. So now that we've gotten it back, we've been able to test everything. Our next project is to take a real look at the vehicle, try to figure out what we want to do to it to make it our sort of overland camping vehicle. We're not going to make it into a rock crawler. We've already got the Wrangler for that, so we don't need this to be a rock crawler. But we want to take this to some great places, and we want to make it as comfortable as we can to live in while we're on those trips. So stick around so you can see how we go about doing that. And in the meantime, we have some other great content coming up, so we hope you enjoy those as well. So I know this took a long time to fix, and some people have said, holy cripes, you know, it wouldn't have taken me that long to fix my Jeep. And they're right. It wouldn't have. But this is a new vehicle. I knew the risks of owning a brand new vehicle when we bought it. We just happen to be one of the lucky few that have had to live with those risks, if you will. But I will give top credit to the folks at Mossy INEOS. Oscar, Taz, did a great job, great with communication. Thanks for the time that you put in on this thing. Thank you to Miguel in Tijuana for all the work you put in getting the insurance sorted out. So probably my only thing that I would sort of grouse about, if that's what you want to call it, is I know INEOS was aware that I was going to do this trip and likely saw what happened. And at no point in this whole process, even when they were working with Mossy to get this sorted out, did they reach out to me, which sort of disappointed me, I guess, in a way. So if I would give INEOS any sort of suggestion, is that you've got a great vehicle here. You're building up a great group of owners. It'd be really nice if you would engage with those owners and really become an active participant in the community. So anyway, if you like this kind of content, if you like hearing the story and want to see more about our Grenadier build or any sort of outdoor gear reviews, please take a moment to hit that sub button in the lower right-hand corner. Give us a thumbs up, share this content with your like-minded friends, and as always, take care, and we'll see you outdoors.